Hello everyone, welcome to yet another sessions for the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles of the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. We missed the session for the 25th June, but we'll be continuing today with the important articles. So let's start with the important articles for the day. The important articles that we've taken up from the newspaper feature on our screens. Just a second. Let's take up the first article for our discussion. The first article which appears in the newspaper talks about bringing MSMEs into global value chains. Now, this article pertains to an important topic of GS3, where we study economy, and the concept of MSME or micro, small and medium enterprises is given a lot of focus, and this article talks about the potential of MSME and what steps are taken to increase the efficiency of this MSME sector. So with this, we'll discuss this article. With this, let's dive deep into this article. First of all, let's ask what is MSME enterprises, or when we say micro, small and medium enterprises, what are these MSMEs? Are these companies first of all? Then if these are companies, what are the characteristics of these companies? So those enterprises with less than rupees 50 crore in investments and turnover below rupees 250 crores, whichever company satisfies this criteria is known as a MSME or micro, small and medium enterprises. So this is the criteria which is based on their investment level, how much amount they're investing in the company, and how much turnover or the total business that is being made by the company. So this becomes first of all the definition of a micro, small and medium enterprise. Now MSMEs, as we can see from this data, most enterprises in our country would fall into the MSME category. That is why the MSMEs hold a lot of importance in Indian economy, where most of the companies fall into this sector and they are the ones driving the economy. That is why they make up for about 45% of the country's total manufacturing output. So together they account for 45% of total output and 40% of total exports, and almost 30% of the national GDP are stressed out due to depleting internal reserves and low visibility of demand for the next 6 months at least, which means that they account almost 30% for the national GDP as well. This shows the massive contribution of the micro, small and medium enterprises done on the economy. Then this is with respect to the contribution to GDP and output front. On the employment front, it is the second largest employment generating sector after agriculture. Since most of the people are employed in this sector, it is the second largest employment generating sector after agriculture, which provides employment to around 120 million people, or more than 1 crore people of India. It provides employment with, and with around 36.1 million units throughout the geographical expanse of the country, MSMEs contribute around 6.1% of the manufacturing GDP and 2.63% of the GDP from service activities. This is for service activities contribution, and total is the 30% contribution to GDP when we mix manufacturing as well as service sector contribution. So this sector now, when it contributes so highly to the Indian economy, we know that due to the pandemic, it has been hit hardest, where when the units are small, they find it more difficult to recover from the shocks that have been there, and the access to resources also gets hit by them. That is why the sector of MSME has been hit hardest by the pandemic. But the potential of MSME sector is truly immense, where in the critical juncture at which India stands, that is, we have a high burgeoning demographic dividend, wherein more and more youthful individuals are arriving in the economy to seek jobs. This MSME sector stands at this juncture to deliver that facility wherein it can create and supply jobs to these youthful people. That is why the growth of MSME sector is very vital for the Indian economy. So what problems are there which first of all ails this MSME sector or these enterprises which work at the small level or the medium level? So the problems that ail them first of all are meeting with the standards. First of all, that while some do meet the standards, but some do not meet the industry standards on productivity, environmental sustainability and health and safety of the workers. So since these enterprises work in a lot of crunch of resources, they often find themselves not meeting the standards set for productivity, for environmental sustainability, maintaining the health and safety of the workers. So this happens, and that is why they are not able to maintain these standards, and this become hazardous for the workers as well, and also for the product that is going to be generated. Then secondly, there is a high degree of informality in the sector, which means that the number of workers who are belonging in the informal sector are more in the MSME, which sort of does not make them possible to avail social security benefits, job security, better working conditions, wage conditions. All of these facilities are not able to be enjoyed by them because of the sector being largely informal in nature, right? Therefore, lack of adherence to labor laws is also seen. Now, what happens as a result when such standards and informality exists in the sector? If the standards are not met, these MSMEs are not able to, since the standards are not met, they are not able to procure the benefits that are available for them either through the government or through other institutions. So these standards even aid their growth forward. That is why these informal enterprises cannot access the formal or MSME support from government as well as institutions. And other important part is they cannot even participate into the global value chain, because let's say if they want to supply or export any material outside the country, wherever they would be exporting, that country will have its own standards that the MSMEs would have to adhere to. Since now they being informal and not adhering to the standards, they even face a problem in linking themselves or participating in these global value chains. So that also becomes a major problem for the MSMEs, because those countries require full compliance and these MSMEs find themselves not adhering to all of them. So this is a major area of problem for them. Now, what efforts are being taken to cure these problems for the MSMEs? So this article is written by the officials from the UNIDO, or United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is the UN arm for increasing and helping or augmenting the development efforts in the country. So the steps largely talked about in this article highlight the government's efforts and the efforts taken by these international organizations such as UNIDO or ILO, which is the International Labour Organization. What efforts have they taken to improve the condition of the MSME sector in the country? So let's look at their efforts. First of all, let's look at the steps taken under MSMEs by Indian government. So the Indian government is giving a lot of priority to MSMEs by giving them priority under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, where the whole point of making India self-reliant is to augment the MSME sector. So, similarly, giving it push under the Make in India campaign to augment India's manufacturing prowess. So when we improve the efficiency of the MSMEs, that is when the manufacturing sector in India can be helped immensely, because the industries which are companies which are working in this sector, most of them are MSMEs and they need proper development. And to further this, schemes such as the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, which is the recently inducted PLI scheme. What is this scheme? This scheme is linked with the production, wherein there are incentives attached to any company who, if make certain level of production in certain time, the government will give them incentives in the form of subsidies. So this is the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, which is being implemented in more than 22 sectors in the Indian economy right now. And similar scheme is the zero effect and zero defect scheme, which is again linked to augment the and improve the efficiency of the MSMEs. These are some of the steps taken by Indian government. Now, what are the steps taken by the international organizations such as the UNIDO, ILO or UNDP, which the article talks about mainly? So first problem, that was of digitalization. As we saw, there is a lot of informality in the sector. So the article talks about various schemes that are being brought, which the international organizations are praising, but these schemes are brought by the Indian government itself. So what are these schemes? To improve the digitalization, which means that in this futuristic world where most companies are using the digital means such as and the means of AI and machine learning to augment their manufacturing process and production process. In this scenario, the MSMEs are quite lagging behind, where they are not just able to jump on this bandwagon of using the AI services and machine learning services, but they are even struggling with digitalization of their services, where a lot of workers are still informal in nature. So what can be done to increase their pace of digitalization? Indian government has furthered several schemes for this, such as the Digital Saksham and interlinking of the Udyam portal. The Udyam portal is specifically for MSMEs, where they need to register, and once they register, all the benefits that are available to them can be given to them. Then there is the eShram portal. eShram portal, which we've talked about earlier, is that portal which is the registry of all the informal workers. All the informal workers need to register on this portal, and once they are registered, then all the social security benefits and other benefits that can be given to these informal workers can be accrued to them after their registrations have been done. This eShram portal, recently inducted, has seen a number of registrations from the informal sector. So these are steps to increase the digitalization process for the MSMEs. Then there is the National Career Service and the Atmanirbhar Employed-Employer Mapping, which is the newly inducted again ASEEM portal. This is again a portal to increase the efficiency for the MSMEs. So all of these portals which are inducted are there to augment the digitalization in the MSME sector, so that all the bottlenecks that exist due to lack of digitalization in the sector are dealt with. So this is the first step that the writers of the article talk about with respect to what is important for the sector to improve and what steps are being taken which are in the right direction. Then second step they talk about is of greening, which means that all the processes that MSMEs carry out, they need to take care of the environmental sustainability factor of it. Those processes need not have an adverse impact on the environment, and for this, processes which are environment friendly need to be taken care of. So this greening is done to reduce environmental impact, which fosters clean tech innovation, which means that kind of technology should be used in these enterprises which are clean and which ultimately result in a low carbon economy, which means that carbon emissions from these companies should be lessened and should be reduced. This process of increasing production as well as making sure that this production process does not have adverse impact on the environment is known as greening. And what is UNIDO saying? That UNIDO, in order to achieve this target, has provided energy advisory services to 695 such MSMEs in 23 different clusters or different sectors to save rupees 81 crore in annual operating costs and preventing 83,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So UNIDO is highlighting its efforts in making this production process for MSMEs green in nature, thereby decreasing the impact on environment by providing the energy advisory services to 695 MSMEs, resulting in a lot of savings in money as well as savings in carbon dioxide gases emissions, which we also call greenhouse gas emissions. Then thirdly, as we saw that there is a stringent need for these MSMEs to participate in the global value chain, as well as whenever such a global value chain is disrupted, the first impact that gets created is on the MSMEs. How so? Let's say, for example, in India, there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies which take raw materials and manufacture finished pharmaceuticals. Now, these raw materials, or which are also known as APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients, these are generally sourced from China. So now these are raw materials which are required to manufacture the finished pharmaceuticals. Now this is known as a part of being a global supply chain, wherein one product or one raw material to manufacture a finished product, different raw materials come from different region. So these raw materials come from China. Let's say due to any happening or any event, this raw material is supplied less to India. What will happen as a result? The MSMEs which are manufacturing the finished pharmaceutical will face a hit. They will face a shortage of raw materials. This is known as getting hit by the supply shocks with respect to the global supply chain. Now, to deal with this was the idea behind inculcating the Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, or to make India self-reliant. So similarly, to increase resilience of supply for the MSMEs, UNIDO is helping diversifying manufacturing centers, which means that these raw materials which are also sourced from other countries and clusters of manufacturing centers which are only centered in some places should be diversified, and such centers should be made to exist in different places as well, which the UNIDO is facilitating. This is to increase their supply chain resilience. Then fourth one is ILO is together with FICCI, which is the Federation of Commerce Corporation of India, which is the association for all the commercial bodies, is supporting MSMEs to create and retaining jobs, because job creation is an important aspect of MSME and a lot of people get their jobs from this sector. So the international organization of ILO, or International Labour Organization, is helping creating and sustaining such jobs. Then, before moving on to the next article, this was our discussion on the MSME sector, which we saw as to how these international organizations are participating in improving the efficiency of MSMEs. With this, let's move on now to our next article. The next article, which appears in the newspaper, talks about the Indian laws on abortions. Now, why these laws become important is because most of us must be seeing that the US Supreme Court has overturned the decision of Roe versus Wade judgment, which was a 1973 judgment, and the US Supreme Court has overturned this judgment, which means that it is a backward step towards the women's right on abortions, where they do not have a right to freely abort whenever they want, and there have been restrictions placed on it. This has been the US Supreme Court overturning of this judgment, and therefore a lot of debate on abortions has started. With this respect, what is the position of Indian laws on the concept of abortion? What is the laws that talk about the abortion on this basis, and what are the different provisions? We'll take a look at that, and these become important for us from the GS2 perspective, where we deal with laws pertaining to social issues. So, coming to Indian context, what are the abortion laws in India? Now, first of all, India instituted the Shantilal Shah Committee in the 1960s, when there was a lot of cases, when there were a lot of cases of unregulated abortions. So, in the furtherance of the recommendations of this committee, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is also known as the MTP Act for short, which was promulgated in the year of 1971. And this act became the principal piece of law dealing with the concept of abortions, and when can abortions be made and when can abortions be not made. So first of all, this act was introduced, which first said that what was the main provision of this act? This act basically tried to regulate abortions, or give out provisions wherein an individual woman can undertake abortion. So what this act stipulated is that generally in order to facilitate abortion up until 20 weeks of pregnancy, which means that under certain circumstances, those circumstances are mentioned in the Act, which we'll be looking at in detail, but under those circumstances, up to 20 weeks of pregnancy, if the pregnancy has not passed the limit of 20 weeks, the Act said that under these circumstances, abortion can be granted. This was the basic nature of the law of Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. This Act has now been amended in the year of 2021, which has increased this period of 20 weeks to 24 weeks. Again, in certain circumstances, which means that the period of pregnancy up to which the abortion can take place or a woman can choose to abort the fetus has been increased from 20 weeks to 24 weeks in the latest amendment. This is known as the gestational age, which is from the time of conceivement to the whatever period of pregnancy is going on is known as the gestational age, which has been increased from 20 to 24 weeks in the latest amendment of 2021. And another provision that is attached is, can a woman directly go into the gynecologist's clinic and undertake an abortion? In such cases, the law does not permit that. The law permits that if the fetus is to be aborted and the gestational age is less than 20 weeks, then that woman would need an opinion of a single registered medical practitioner, which means that she would need the authorization from a registered medical practitioner that these conditions are fulfilled. Now, what conditions are those? We'll be taking a look at that, but these conditions are fulfilled and the fetus can be aborted if the pregnancy age or gestational age is less than 20 weeks for the fetus. Then the opinion of a single registered medical practitioner is required for that. If the gestational age has crossed beyond 20 weeks and it is less than 24 weeks, then what is the provision? Then opinion for 2 medical registered practitioners is required, where 2 medical registered practitioners would have to authorize the woman that certain conditions are satisfied wherein the abortion can take place. This is the part of the amendment of 2021. What was the case in the earlier Act? Earlier, single registered medical practitioner's opinion was required for 12 weeks of pregnancy up until 12 weeks, and from 12 weeks to 20, 2 registered medical practitioners' opinion was required. So this is the change from the previous Act to the latest amendment. Now, what are these conditions for which the medical practitioner would be looking at and authorizing the abortion of the pregnancy? Let's look at those conditions. Under the 2021 Act, the medical termination of pregnancy is permitted, which means that abortion can be done if certain conditions are met. So, if it is backed by the medical opinion and is being sought for at least one of the following reasons. So, what are those reasons? Though it cannot be beyond these reasons, one cannot just go and abort the fetus. So, what is that conditions? If the continuation of the pregnancy would involve a risk to the life of pregnant women. So, if there is a risk to the life of pregnant women, that can become a ground for abortion, and this the medical practitioner would consider while authorizing it. The second reason can be if its continuation would result in grave injury to the women's physical or mental health. So again, the continuation of the pregnancy should result in grave injury to the women's physical or mental health. If it is happening, that can become a reason for termination of the pregnancy. And third reason is in the case of substantial risk that if the child was born, it would suffer from serious physical or mental abnormality. So this is with respect to the outcome of the fetus, where if it is born, there is substantial risk to the fetus and it might result into a physical or mental abnormality. In that case also, it can become a valid reason to seek the termination of pregnancy. So these are the conditions with which, if 20 weeks have not passed and before the passing of the 20 weeks, a single medical practitioner's opinion can be taken and the pregnancy can be terminated. What happens, as we saw, where two medical practitioners' opinion is needed from 20 weeks to 24 weeks of the pregnancy? So in that case, there are certain other conditions. So the pregnancy can be terminated up to 24 weeks of gestational age after the opinion of two registered medical practitioners under these conditions. Now what are these conditions? Logically we can think that these conditions now need to be graver and more severe, wherein such relaxation of 4 weeks has been granted to the women. So in this case, what are these conditions? If the woman is either a survivor of sexual assault or rape or incest. So in these cases of sexual assault, rape or incest, if the woman is a survivor of such an incident, it can become a ground for termination of pregnancy even beyond 20 weeks and up to 24 weeks. Second, if she is a minor. And third, if her marital status has changed during the ongoing pregnancy, that is either widowhood or divorce. With the time of pregnancy, the status was different and now the status has changed. That can also become a ground for termination beyond 20 weeks. Then fourth is, if she has major physical disabilities or is mentally ill. In these circumstances as well, the granting of termination of pregnancy beyond 20 weeks can be granted. Fifth is, on the grounds of fetal malformation incompatible with life, or if the child is born, it would be seriously handicapped. In these circumstances as well, the pregnancy can be terminated. And sixth is, if the woman is in humanitarian settings or disaster or emergency situation as declared by the government. So if such kind of situations arise where it would be difficult for the women to give birth and take care of the child, which can be a disaster or other such emergency situations, in that case termination of the pregnancy can be granted, permitted that two such practitioners give the medical opinion to authorize this. This is the status of the law with respect to the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is there in place in India to deal with the concept of abortion. This become important because if there is any issue going on, it's important for us to take a look at the Indian context of the law. Can there be any criticism of the law? The criticism of the law that is being talked about in the article is that one major criticism is that since the registered medical practitioners are to be authorized to do so, there are not enough gynecologists to carry out these abortion procedures, which becomes a problem. That is why most of the women, around 8 lakh in numbers, is the number of illegal or unsupported abortions that has been carried out in the past years in India, which highlights the need for increasing the number of registered and qualified gynecologists in the country. So this was the discussion with respect to the Indian laws, or which is the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, which deals with the abortion laws in the country. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article, which appears in the newspaper, talks about the implications of India's new VPN rules. Now, VPN or Virtual Private Network is a new concept, and it becomes important for us to study from the science and technology point of view, wherein we see that a lot of new technologies are often asked in the prelims examination, and the implications of it can become a part for us to study from the mains perspective. So we look at this news as to what are these VPN rules, what are their implications, and starting from what is a VPN and its uses. So first of all, what have been the directions? India's CERTIN, or Computer Emergency and Response Team, which is the body functioning under the Ministry of Information and Technology, which deals with the concept of and phenomenon of cyber crimes. This body has mandated virtual private networks or VPN providers to record and keep their customers' logs for 180 days, right? So we look at what these services do, but whatever the data that these VPN providers accumulate, they are to provide the record for their customers' logs and to store it for 180 days. And then it also asks these firms to collect and store customer data for up to 5 years. So whatever data they are collecting from the customers, they are to store it for 5 years, and then further mandated that any cybercrime recorded must be reported to the certain or this body within 6 hours of the crime. Now, why are these regulations or rules being promulgated with the VPN providers? The idea behind introducing these rules for VPN is, according to the certain body, is to track all the events that are happening, because a lot of crimes can go unnoticed. The certain wants to tighten its regulation, wherein these service providers which are providing the services to customers, whatever data they are collecting, the government wants a hold over that data, wherein it is mandating the VPN providers to store that data, and also whenever the government will call upon to ask for that data, the VPN providers have to supply that data to the government. So this is a move done with in order with the objective of safekeeping the citizens and avoiding the crimes, cyber crimes which are increasingly occurring in the country, with the numbers increase in a lot of manifold from the past few years. So therefore, to deal with this menace, these rules have been promulgated by the body. Now first of all, let's understand what is a VPN. I'm sorry. When we talk about a VPN, it means that it is a virtual private network. So what is it? Let's understand it this way, through an example. Let's say that you sit in your car and start driving in the neighborhood and in the market. This we can attach it to the analogy of surfing on the net. So your car has a number plate. In the world of internet, this number plate or identification is the IP address or internet protocol address, wherein wherever you go with your car that is surfing on the internet, this number plate identified by the IP address will be identified and will be unique for you, and wherever you go, you will be traced to that location or website wherever you are surfing. Now imagine a situation where you do not want to let any person know where you are going or where you are surfing on the internet. In this case, a VPN comes into the picture, or a virtual private network, where what it does is, in this example, where you are going in your car, it changes the number plate or it masks your IP address. So when you have changed your number plate and you are driving your car, it means that nobody would be able to trace your location or trace your route wherever you are going. This is the job done by the virtual private network or VPN, which basically masks your IP address and shields your information and does not let the other people know about your details on the internet and your history or whatever you are doing on the internet. This is the service of the VPN, wherein it is a private network that is virtually created when we surf the web. Every time you switch on your VPN connection, a secure channel is created which acts as an intermediary between the device and the destination web page. So which means that the device and the destination web page, a secure channel is created. This channel won't be able to be accessed by other agencies or other bodies. So therefore data is then sent to an external VPN. Now whichever VPN service provider will be creating this secure channel, that will be taking the data. So in effect, this data which would be protected by other agencies would still be going to the VPN provider, which they will be making use of. So it goes to an external VPN server which then connects you to your destination. So this is the job done by the VPN. However, when the VPN server does this, the IP address, which is the online equivalent of a user specific postal code, or as I gave an example, the number plate for our car, which makes us identified in the sector, that is changed. The IP address is changed and thus the websites are unable to accurately track your location. This private network promotes online safety and enhances the overall privacy on the web. So this is being done for the uses which are to enhance privacy and safety for anyone who wants to surf the web. How does it ensure privacy? When the IP address of the individuals won't be able to be visible, these websites which can otherwise see the IP address, they can use it to accurately identify your identity and location. With the use of VPN, this can be protected and therefore privacy can be maintained for the individual. Second is the safety factor, wherein a VPN would prevent everyone from the government to cyber criminals to track you easily, and therefore using a VPN can de-link your online activity from your IP address. A VPN will also protect your internet traffic, keeping it encrypted the whole time. So this is a argument for safety of the VPN, where other people won't be able to identify your trace on the internet as well as your location from where you are looking and what websites are you accessing to. So this becomes a safety point which the VPN providers offer. And other is location spoofing, when the IP address is marked, is masked and hidden, which means that no one is able to identify your location. So a virtual private network, what it essentially does is that it links your device to the web page, and the secure channel that it is creating, it can create a channel wherein the other IP address or the new IP address from which you are accessing the information or the website, it might show the location of a different country altogether. This is known as location spoofing, wherein why people use VPN is to get around geo restrictions, which means that let's say that there are certain websites which are banned in our country, and there are certain websites which one person needs to access for certain kind of use. This VPN helps them to access this information by changing their location. Thereby these websites which are not accessible otherwise in the country get accessible. So to take a simple example, certain films or other content which may not be available in our region can be accessed by logging in from a different location. So these are the services which the VPN can provide, which the questions on which can be asked in the prelims examination. Now what has happened in this particular case with these developments, wherein the certain has brought in these new rules for these VPN providers, where it is asking to record and keep the customers' logs for 180 days, store the data for 5 years, and to report the cyber crimes that are happening within 6 hours. This is done by the government to tighten their hold over these VPN providers who get access to data of the citizens where otherwise the government is not getting. So this is the move done by the government. But this is a danger sign for the VPN providers, wherein if they are asked to supply the data to the governments, a lot of VPN's USP, wherein they function on this point that we will be protecting your data, that will get defeated. That is why a lot of established VPN companies are exiting India and taking their services out of India. This is the fiasco that is happening with respect to the new rules for VPN regulation and the reactions by the VPN service providers. This was the discussion based on this particular issue. With this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, from July 1, Himachal to buy back single-use plastic. Now, this is a important step that is being taken by the Himachal Pradesh government, wherein it is trying to introduce concept of environmental conservation in the primary schools and colleges itself, wherein young minds who are taught the concept of environmental conservation, if they are taught that in such young age, they are better able to understand the importance of environmental preservation. So that is where the Himachal Pradesh government is furthering a scheme to buy back single-use plastic. How is it doing so? It is various schools in the government or in the state are being said that all those students who have single-use plastic at their home, if they deposit into the school, they will get cash returns in terms of this deposits based on 75 rupees per kg. For every kilogram of single-use plastic deposited, the children will get 75 rupees. Now, the incentive, monetary incentive is to gamify this particular process and to increase the awareness and give them incentive to combat this use of single-use plastic. What are single-use plastic? Those plastics which are less than 50 microns in thickness, which means that they are very thin plastics. So this is the buyback scheme for them which has been introduced, and this scheme is being introduced under the National Green Corps. The National Green Corps, which is also called the Eco Club. This is being done under the national scheme of National Green Corps, which is also called the Eco Club. That becomes important for us to study from the UPSC point of view. So we'll take a look at what this National Green Corps is, under what broader umbrella of scheme does it fit in, and what is the concept of this Eco Club. This is the Eco Club which would be functioning to implement this buyback scheme of single-use plastic in the schools. So what is this scheme? First is the Environment Education Awareness and Training, which is also known as EAT. This scheme was introduced in the fiscal year way back in 1983 and 84 by the Environment Ministry, which is the Environment Education Awareness and Training by the Ministry of Environment, as a central sector scheme. This was done to promote environmental awareness among all sections of the society and to mobilize people's participation for conservation of environment. And to further this education and awareness and training initiatives, certain sub-schemes were introduced under this through the implementation of 4 programs. Now what are these 4 programs? One among them is the National Green Corps. Second is National Environmental Awareness Campaign. Third is Seminar and Workshops. And fourth is National Nature Camping Program. These are the 4 ways of implementing the education, awareness and training for environment. Now under these programs, financial assistance is provided to various organizations for undertaking activities and awareness campaigns for the protection of environment of the country. So in this case, these schools which would be initiating the buyback schemes for single-use plastics, who will supply the money to them, under this scheme financial assistance would be given to the schemes to these schools to further this scheme. Now let's come to the National Green Corps or the Eco Club program. What is this? Under the National Green Corps, the Eco Club program was initiated in 2001-2002. What is this club? This club would be to impart knowledge to school children through hands-on experience about their immediate environment, interactions within and the problems therein, and to inculcate compassion among people towards environment and sensitize children on issues related to the environment and development. And finally, to build young cadres of students and trigger their sensitivity to environment protection and conservation. Although it is envisaged that the number of eco clubs must be enhanced from about 1.5 lakh at present to 2 lakh in the ensuing year of 2020 to 2021. So as we see, this is the objective of Eco Club, which is being furthered in this particular article, where we see that the schools are being facilitating the buyback scheme, and who is implementing them? The eco clubs of those schools are implementing, which have the objective of making students aware of the environmental issues and make them work towards those issues. So this was our discussion relating to the important articles of today. We stop here and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles that feature in the newspaper. Thank you.